They say there's no good news.
There's no good news.
Before we get into what we came to get into, let me make the introduction. In case you don't know, I'm Misha and I, aka No Good Writer, and I'm joined by my co-host, the anonymous K9. She is not only the star of the show, she is also the brains of the whole operation. Now, let's get to it. As I record, it is December 9th, 2020, and it has been over 2 weeks since anyone has heard from the British blogger Esther Dingley, who went missing in the Pyrenees Mountains. Esther is the female half of the hiking blog Esther and Dan, which she runs with her partner Dan Colligate. So a little background on their blogging career. Dan reportedly suffered from some type of serious illness that involved flesh-eating bacteria, and he got an infection that almost killed him about 6 years ago. Somewhere along the way, both Dan and Esther have also been diagnosed with depression. So after Dan's life-threatening experience, him and Esther left their home in Durham, England, and for the past 6 years, they've been traveling across Europe in a camper van, going on hiking and biking excursions. Now, according to an interview they did with BBC, they were apart for some of those adventures, but for most of that time, they were together. And the reason that I added that little detail is because otherwise, what I'm about to tell you may sound bizarre. Okay, back to Dan and Esther. So about a month ago, Dan decided to stay on a farm in Gascony, France. Apparently it was common for both him and Esther to work on farms and the house sit for extra money. So while Dan stayed house sitting on this farm, Esther decided to travel hundreds of miles away to go on a month-long solo hiking mission. And this is how she ended up in the Pyrenees Mountains, alone, hitchhiking, and reportedly asking strangers for food. But we'll get to that part later. So in the BBC interview, they were streaming from different locations, and Esther explained this decision to part ways. She said, quote, "We realized that during the coronavirus, we had not been apart from each other for a year, so decided to each just do our own thing for a bit. This whole thing has been really good for us individually and our relationship. We are genuinely happy now." End quote. Now, fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. Esther is out there doing her thing, and she's posting on Facebook daily. So on November 18th, she said she spent the night at a place called Cabana Santa Ana. The next day she got up and she climbed the peak of whatever she was climbing. When she got to the top, she said she met a guy who was the first person she had seen in almost 2 days. In the post, Esther said she had the option to stay up on top in a cabin that had the luxury of a mattress. But it was still early, only about 2 p.m. And if she went back down the mountain, this, quote, kind fella, who is also AKA a complete stranger, or at least it seems, would give her a ride either further up the valley to another refuge that she wanted to go to, or he would take her back to her camper. Yoga, good food, and sunshine awaited me back at the camper, she wrote at the end of that post. So authorities believe she took the ride. And they are reportedly looking for this kind fella who hasn't been heard from since. But that's not where Esther's story ends. She apparently made it through the next couple of days, Because even though she wasn't posting on Facebook about her trip as she had been, on the 21st, she was on the Spanish side of the border in a place called Benasque, and she planned to hike to the French side of the border to stay at a place called Refuge de Venasque. Although there's no post about the journey on the Esther and Dan Facebook page like she had posted in the past days, she did post on the couple's Instagram page on November 21st. There were about 10 pictures showing what was supposed to be her view from Peak Sauvegarde, which was on the way up to this refuge where she wanted to stay. I say supposed to be because I don't know what the place looks like, but one of the pictures does have a rock with Peak Sauvegarde painted on it. Can you confirm this was Peak Sauvegarde? Okay, just checking. Just trying to be fair. Fair airtime. Anyway, that November the 21st Instagram post says, "I'm in heaven. The snail is on the move again and loving it. Amazing views on the border of France and Spain." And Dan was tagged in the post. According to the news reports, the last time anyone heard from her was 4 p.m. the next day. That's November the 22nd, when she sent a WhatsApp message to Dan with a selfie of her at Peak Sauvegarde. Dan reported her missing 3 days later, on the 25th, which is the day that she was supposed to return to meet back up with him on this farm. But of course, she never showed up. French and Spanish authorities have both been involved in the search for Dingley. According to the media reports, her van was found in Benasque, where she would have set out to go to Peak Sauvegarde. And witnesses told the civil guard in Spain that they saw Dingley on Peak Sauvegarde. The last people who are believed to have seen her alive at this point are the Spanish Olympic skier Martí Vigo del Arco and his girlfriend. Del Arco told authorities that they were also along the route that Dingley took to Peak Sauvegarde. They said they met a British woman while they were heading down, and she was heading up. She approached them and asked them if they had fruit or any fresh food, but they didn't have anything. So, according to the skier, she went about her way, they went about their way. But despite numerous search parties, dogs, a helicopter, a drone, there has been no trace of Dingley. It's a mystery. For a while, it was being approached as somewhat of a search and rescue mission. Then, investigators launched an investigation exploring what they called non-accident options. But certain people are dismissive of certain things. For example, French authorities reject the theory that Dingley could have been abducted. Captain Jean-Marc Bordenaro said, quote, "It is impossible to be kidnapped on the mountain. You're not going to hide her in a rucksack. There would have to be a camping car or something," end quote. He also ruled out the possibility that she was attacked by a bear because, according to him, all of the creatures on the mountain are trapped. But as of yesterday, media reports said fears are starting to mount that Dingley either fell into a lake or one of the water pits in the mountain, which is now encased in ice. But her friends and family don't seem to think that an accident is what's behind Dingley's disappearance, because according to them, they describe her as being too strong, too skilled, and too athletic to have gone out that way. In a December the 1st Facebook post, Dan said, "Taking into account Esther's high level of experience, the nature of the terrain, the good weather she would have had, the fact that she had a clearly defined route for Sunday evening and Monday, and various other factors, both search coordinators have essentially told me that although they can never be 100% sure, the prevailing opinion in the search teams is that she isn't there. That if she had fallen from one of the paths, they would have expected to find her, given the intensity, the closeness of the search, and the fact that most of the trails are really quite straightforward across open ground." I mean, I guess it's optimism, for her family and friends to believe that the Pyrenees Mountains couldn't take down Dingley. But according to a local mayor in that area, he told the media that the area is dangerous and there are 7 or 8 fatalities each year. So he said it's not surprising to hear that someone else has gone missing, because it is never advisable to go out into those mountains alone, which goes without saying. And one of the reasons that authorities haven't gotten a lot of information about Dingley, such as witness testimony, is because Spain was in lockdown, so the trails were mostly deserted. And apparently some people have critical feelings about this whole situation because Refuge de Venasque, where she was supposed to stay, they also have a Facebook post about her disappearance. And they said, quote, "While we understand the emotion of this behavior during this lockdown time, please do not comment on it. We are in an emergency situation." Now, some will say this isn't the time to discuss her choices, but I think that's debatable. Because when is the time? When something tragic happens, it's never the time to discuss decision making in the moment. But when there's a tragic outcome, it's also not the time to discuss decision making because we're supposed to be so wrapped up in the loss. I mean, when are we supposed to talk about it? When we're dealing with hypothetical situations? I think when you're in the midst of a real world example, that is an excellent time to discuss what has gone wrong. And an important reason why is because there are a lot of women out here right now who are either making equally bad decisions or who are about to. And like the mayor said, we can lose a few here and there, and some of us act like it's no surprise, and others act like, oh my God, this is horrible. Which, yes, it is a horrible situation. And I think almost anyone who hears this story hopes that there is a positive outcome for Dingley. But her decision was a bad decision. Because let's be clear, it's one thing to be independent. It's one thing to want space when you're in a relationship. But it's something completely different when a lone female decides to go off into the mountains in a country that is shut down due to quarantine and trek along the border between 2 foreign countries by herself. I don't care that she had a physical fitness background. I don't care about all of her hiking experience. No one, actually not even a man, should have made this choice. As content creators, I understand we're often caught up in what we're doing. I really get that. I've made some bad decisions and taken some risks. But to this degree, no. Ladies, we have to do better to take care of ourselves. I know we have a lot of laptop warriors out there, the digital nomads. I know we have a lot of globetrotters. And some of us are not fortunate enough to have a partner that can tag along everywhere we go. I'm not saying that if you don't have a partner that you need to stay home, but I am saying sometimes if it's a solo mission, you need to set parameters. I mean, look, from what I've read, Dingley is her father's only daughter. And he's feeling how you would expect he feels, distraught. And for what? Because of all the things she's done, traveling around Europe for years and years, of all of the places she's seen, she decided to venture off into the mountains by herself to stay in mountain huts. And this also says a lot about what people define as a partner. Because yes, a grown woman does what she wants to do. But one thing about it, it's nothing to brag on when your partner of nearly 18 years, like Esther and Dan, is happy that you, his partner, are now traipsing through the mountains for a month by yourself, hitchhiking with kind fellas and asking strangers for fresh food. I mean, I personally have never even been in a relationship with the type of man who would be cool with the idea of me posting on Facebook like, oh yeah, I met this cool guy. He's about to give me a ride wherever I want to go. I'm just out here in the mountains, you know, me and him. I mean, in the circles that I roll in, that's what we call... Okay, fine. I'll leave that alone. One thing I will say before I wrap that up, I hope I never end up in a relationship like that. I know I can come up with stupid ideas. I know I can be irrational and strong-willed, but I hope I don't make choices like this for a showing of independence, and definitely not for the sake of creating content. But if I am going through something and I do come up with an idea that wild, if someone I know or love is going through something and they come up with an idea that wild, if they're in a relationship, I hope it's not with a partner who will do an interview with BBC acting like this decision was cool and he's genuinely happy now. And even if there is no partner involved, granted, your life is yours to live however you choose. But ladies, as a matter of fact, everybody, if you love others the way they love you, sometimes before you make decisions, you need to stop and consider that you're a mother, sister, daughter, cousin, friend, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At this point, the investigation for Dingley continues. However, Sergeant Jorge Lopez Ramos, who is head of one of the mountain rescue teams, said any searches will now have to be done on foot, if they're possible at all. Ramos also said the chances of finding Esther alive are minimal, and it's leaving a very bitter taste in their mouths. So if you want to see pictures of Dingley or check out some of the social media posts I referred to and get more information about her disappearance, you can go over to nogoodwords.com, KNOWGOODWORDS.com, and you can click on the show notes for this podcast. Also, if you enjoy this podcast and you want to show some love, please subscribe. It's on 9 platforms. Details for PayPal and Cash App will be wherever you clicked into this episode. And me and my co-host would like to say in advance, we appreciate you. As always, we won't tell you what to think, but we will tell you what to think about. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And please think about those decisions you're making.